I never expected a simple phone call to shatter the carefully constructed walls I'd built around my past. But there it was, my mother's voice crackling through the speaker, words I never thought I'd hear again. "Harper, it's your father. He's dying." 12 years. That's how long it had been since I'd spoken to either of my parents. 12 years of building a life free from the toxicity that had defined my childhood. And now, with just a few words, I felt those old wounds threatening to reopen. I stood in my kitchen, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The cheerful yellow walls I'd painted myself suddenly felt suffocating. "What do you want from me?" I managed to choke out, hating how small my voice sounded. "He's asking for you," my mother replied, her tone a mixture of desperation and accusation. "You need to come home." Home. The word felt foreign on my tongue. Home was this apartment I'd worked so hard to afford, filled with books and art and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Home was not the sprawling suburban house where I'd learned to make myself small, to fade into the background while my sister Lily took center stage. "I'll think about it," I said, ending the call before she could respond. I sank to the floor, my back against the cool refrigerator door, and let the memories wash over me. I was 7 when I first realized that Lily was the favorite. It was her birthday, and our parents had thrown her an extravagant party complete with a bouncy castle and a magician. I remember standing in the corner, watching as Lily twirled in her new party dress, our father's eyes shining with pride. "Daddy, look!" Lily had shouted, showing off a cartwheel she'd been practicing. "That's my girl," he'd beamed, scooping her up in his arms. "You're going to be a star someday." I'd looked down at my own dress, a hand-me-down from Lily that was slightly too big, and felt a knot form in my stomach. Later that night, I'd overheard my mother talking to a friend in the kitchen. "Lily's just so special," she'd gushed. "She's going to do great things. Harper, well, she tries her best." Those words had cut deep, carving out a space inside me that I spent years trying to fill. I threw myself into my studies, determined to prove that I, too, could be special. But no matter how many A's I brought home or how many academic competitions I won, it was never enough to overshadow Lily's effortless charm and beauty. As we grew older, the disparity only widened. Lily was the homecoming queen, the lead in every school play, the girl everyone wanted to be friends with. I was the quiet one, the bookworm who spent lunch periods in the library, dreaming of a future far away from the shadow of my sister. The day I left for college was the first time I felt like I could breathe. I'd chosen a school on the opposite coast, as far from my family as I could get. My parents had barely looked up from fussing over Lily's latest drama when I'd said goodbye. "Don't forget to call," my mother had said absently, smoothing Lily's hair. I never did. Now, 12 years later, I'd built a life I was proud of. I had a successful career as a software engineer, a small but loyal group of friends who valued me for who I was, not who I was related to. I'd even started dating someone, a kind-hearted teacher named Alex, who looked at me like I was the only person in the room. But as I sat on my kitchen floor, the ghost of my past looming large, I realized that I'd never truly escaped. The hurt, the anger, the longing for approval, it was all still there, buried just beneath the surface. With shaking hands, I pulled up my contacts and dialed the one person who had always been there for me. "Jess, I need you." An hour later, Jess was at my door, armed with a bottle of wine and a sympathetic ear. We sat on my couch, and I poured out the whole story, the call, my father's illness, the flood of memories I couldn't shake. "Harper," Jess said gently, taking my hand, "you don't owe them anything. You've worked so hard to build this life. You don't have to go back if you don't want to." I nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. But even as the words left her mouth, I knew what I had to do. Not for them, but for me. to face the demons that had haunted me for so long. "I have to go," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to finish this, once and for all." The next morning, I found myself on a plane, watching the familiar landscape of my childhood come into view. My stomach churned as the taxi pulled up to the house where I'd grown up. It looked smaller somehow, the once immaculate lawn now overgrown, paint peeling from the shutters. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. The woman who answered was a shadow of the mother I remembered. Her hair was gray now, her face lined with worry and exhaustion. "Harper," she breathed, reaching out as if to touch me before thinking better of it. "You came." I nodded stiffly, stepping inside. The house smelled of disinfectant and sickness, a far cry from the artificial floral scents my mother had once favored. She led me upstairs to my father's room, and I steeled myself for what I might find. He lay in a hospital bed, machines beeping softly around him. His once robust frame was wasted away, skin sallow and eyes sunken. But when he saw me, a spark of recognition lit up his face. "Harper," he wheezed, reaching out a bony hand. "My little girl." I felt a lump form in my throat. How many times had I longed to hear those words? To be acknowledged as his daughter, not just Lily's less interesting sister. But now, faced with his frailty, I felt only a confusing mix of pity and lingering resentment. I perched on the edge of the bed, allowing him to grasp my hand. "I'm here, Dad." We talked for a while, or rather, he talked and I listened. He spoke of regrets, of time wasted, of pride in the woman I'd become. Part of me wanted to drink in the validation I'd craved for so long. But another part, the part that had learned to stand on her own, whispered that it was too little, too late. As our conversation wound down, my father's expression grew serious. "Harper, there's something I need to ask you." I tensed, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "It's about Lily," he said, and I felt my heart sink. Of course it was about Lily. It was always about Lily. "What about her?" I asked, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. "She's struggling," he said carefully. "After I'm gone, I need to know that she'll be taken care of. I was hoping you might be able to help her out. Financially." I stared at him, disbelief warring, with a sick sense of vindication. Even now, even from his deathbed, he was asking me to sacrifice for Lily. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice low and controlled. "You barely acknowledged my existence for most of my life. You poured everything into Lily. Your love, your attention, your resources. And now, after 12 years of silence, you want me to bail her out?" My father had the grace to look ashamed. "Harper, I know we made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I cut him off, standing up. "You crushed my self-esteem. You made me feel like I was worth nothing compared to her. And now you have the audacity to ask me for money?" "Please," he pleaded, reaching for me. "She's your sister." I took a step back, shaking my head. "No, I won't do it. I won't enable her dependency any more than you already have. I've worked hard for everything I have. If Lily needs help, she can learn to stand on her own 2 feet, just like I had to." With that, I turned and walked out of the room, ignoring my father's weak calls behind me. I found my mother in the hallway, her face a mask of worry and disapproval. "How could you speak to him like that?" she hissed. "He's dying, Harper." "And that excuses everything?" I shot back. "I came here because I thought maybe, just maybe, things could be different. But nothing's changed. It's still all about Lily." As if summoned by her name, my sister appeared at the top of the stairs. She looked older, but still beautiful in that effortless way that had always made me feel plain in comparison. "Harper?" she said, her voice small. "Is that really you?" I nodded curtly, not trusting myself to speak. Lily rushed down the stairs, arms outstretched as if to hug me. I took a step back, and she froze, hurt flashing across her face. "Oh, Harp," she said, using the nickname I'd always hated. "I've missed you so much. We all have." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Really? Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look like much has changed. Dad's still trying to solve your problems, and Mom's still making excuses for both of you." Lily's lower lip trembled. "That's not fair. I've been taking care of them. Where have you been all this time?" "Where have I been?" I repeated incredulously. "I've been building a life for myself. A life where I'm valued for who I am, not constantly compared to my perfect sister." "Perfect?" Lily scoffed. "Is that what you think? My life is a mess, Harper. I'm divorced. I can barely hold down a job. Meanwhile, look at you, successful, independent. You've always been the strong one." Her words should have been validating, but they only fueled my anger. "And whose fault is that, Lily? You had every advantage, every opportunity, but you never had to work for anything, so you never learned how." "Girls, please," our mother interjected. "This isn't helping anyone. Harper, your father is dying. Can't you put aside your resentment for his sake?" I turned to her, years of pent-up frustration boiling over. "My resentment? Do you have any idea what it was like growing up in this house? To constantly be told in 100 little ways that I wasn't good enough? That Lily was the special one? The one who mattered? That's not true," my mother protested weakly. "We loved you both equally." "Bullshit," I spat. "You know what? I'm done. I'm done trying to make you understand. Done hoping for an apology that's never going to come. I came here to make peace with my past, but I can see now that was a mistake." I pushed past them, heading for the door. Behind me, I could hear Lily start to cry, my mother's soothing murmurs. The familiar sound made my chest ache, remembering all the times I'd been the one in tears, with no one to comfort me. As I reached for the doorknob, my father's voice rang out from upstairs. "Harper, please don't go." I hesitated, my hand on the cool metal. For a moment, I was that little girl again, desperate for her daddy's approval. But then I thought of Alex, of Jess, of all the people in my life who loved me for who I was. I thought of the strength I'd found in myself, the life I'd built from the ashes of my childhood. "I'm sorry," I called back, not sure if I meant it for him or for myself. "I can't do this anymore." With that, I walked out into the sunlight, leaving behind the weight of expectations and disappointments that had burdened me for so long. As I made my way down the familiar street, I pulled out my phone and dialed Alex's number. "Hey," I said, when he picked up, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I'm coming home." The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction of complex code and looming deadlines. But at night, when the apartment grew quiet, I found myself reliving those moments in my childhood home, wondering if I'd made the right choice. It was Alex who finally broke through my self-imposed isolation. He showed up at my door one evening, arms laden with takeout from my favorite Thai place. "Enough hiding," he said gently, setting the food down on my cluttered coffee table. "Talk to me, Harper." And so I did. I told him everything. The years, of feeling invisible, the constant comparisons to Lily, the crushing weight of never being enough. I told him about the visit, about my father's request and my refusal. As I spoke, I felt something shift inside me, like a long-held breath finally being released. "I'm proud of you," Alex said when I'd finished, pulling me close. "It takes incredible strength to stand up for yourself like that." His words washed over me like a balm, soothing raw edges I hadn't even realized were still bleeding. For the first time since the phone call, I felt like I could breathe again. But the peace was short-lived. The next morning, I woke to a barrage of missed calls and text messages from my mother and Lily. Apparently, they'd taken to social media to air their grievances, painting me as the heartless daughter who'd abandoned her dying father. I stared at my phone, watching as old acquaintances from high school and distant relatives chimed in with their disappointment and judgment. The old Harper would have crumbled under the weight of their disapproval. But I wasn't that girl anymore. With shaking hands, I opened my own social media accounts and began to type. I poured out my story, the years of favoritism, the emotional neglect, the way I'd had to claw my way to self-worth. I wrote about the impossible choice I'd been given, to either enable my sister's dependency or be branded as selfish and unloving. I choose neither, I wrote in conclusion. I choose to love myself enough to walk away from toxicity, even when it wears the face of family. I choose to build a life filled with people who value me for who I am, not for what I can give them. And I hope that by sharing my story, others who have felt invisible or unworthy might find the courage to do the same. I hit post before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone. Alex found me an hour later, curled up on the couch, alternating between tears and laughter. "You okay?" he asked, settling beside me. I nodded, surprised to find that I meant it. I think I finally am. The fallout from my post was both better and worse than I'd expected. For every angry message from a family member or family friend, there were dozens of supportive comments from people who'd been through similar experiences. My inbox filled with stories of toxic family dynamics, of the struggle to break free and find self-worth. I read each one, marveling at the strength and resilience of these strangers who had become an unexpected support system. Their words reminded me that I wasn't alone, that my experiences, while painful, were far from unique. A week after my post went viral, I received a call from an old high school classmate named Emma. We'd never been close. She'd been part of Lily's popular crowd. But her voice was warm and apologetic. "Harper, I had no idea," she said. "All those years, we thought you had it all together. You were so smart, so capable. We never realized—" "It's okay," I assured her, surprised to find that I meant it. "You couldn't have known." "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," Emma continued. "And thank you. Your post made me take a hard look at my own family dynamics. I think it's time I had some difficult conversations of my own." As I hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Maybe this was why I'd had to go through all of this, not just to heal myself, but to help others find their own path to healing. The next few months were a whirlwind of change. My story had struck a chord, and I found myself being invited to speak at support groups and write articles about setting boundaries and finding self-worth outside of family validation. It wasn't always easy. There were days when the old doubts crept in, when I wondered if I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. But then I'd remember the little girl I'd once been, so desperate for love and approval, and I'd stand firm in my decisions. My father passed away 3 months after my visit. I received the news via a terse email from my mother, informing me of the funeral arrangements. For days, I agonized over whether or not to attend. In the end, it was Jess who helped me find clarity. "Harper," she said, her voice gentle but firm, over the phone. "You don't have to go to honor him. You've already done the hard work of honoring yourself." I realized she was right. My healing didn't depend on a final confrontation or a dramatic graveside reconciliation. It was in the quiet moments of self-affirmation, in the loving relationships I'd built, in the strength I'd found to share my story. On the day of the funeral, while my family gathered to say goodbye, I took a solitary walk in the park near my apartment. As I watched families play and couples stroll hand in hand, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. I might not have the family I was born into, but I had created a family of my own, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and unconditional love. Months passed, and life settled into a new normal. I threw myself into my work, finding joy in coding challenges that once would have felt like attempts to prove my worth. Now, they were simply puzzles to be solved, opportunities to grow and learn. My relationship with Alex deepened, our shared experiences of family struggles, creating a bond of understanding that went beyond romance. We moved in together, filling our shared space with books, plants, and the warmth of genuine affection. One crisp autumn evening, as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset, Alex turned to me with a serious expression. "Harper," he said, taking my hand. "I want you to know that I see you, all of you, the brilliant mind, the kind heart, the fierce determination. You're not invisible, not to me, and I fall more in love with you every day." Tears welled up in my eyes as I squeezed his hand. "Thank you," I whispered, the words feeling inadequate for the emotions swelling in my chest. It was moments like these that reminded me how far I'd come. The little girl who had once felt unseen, unheard, unloved. She was still a part of me, but she was no longer in control. I had given her a voice, acknowledged her pain, and in doing so, had set us both free. As the weeks turned to months, I found myself thinking less and less about my family. The anger that had once consumed me had faded, replaced by a gentle sadness for what could have been. I still had moments of weakness, days when I'd catch myself wondering if Lily was okay, if my mother was coping with her grief. But I resisted the urge to reach out. Some doors, once closed, are better left that way. Instead, I focused on building the life I'd always dreamed of. I started mentoring young women in tech, remembering how much I would have benefited from a strong female role model in my youth. Watching these brilliant, ambitious girls blossom under my guidance filled me with a sense of purpose I'd never experienced before. It was through this mentoring program that I met Zoe, a fiercely intelligent 16-year-old with a passion for AI. She reminded me so much of myself at that age, eager to prove herself, desperate for validation. But unlike me, Zoe had support. She had people telling her she was worthy, that her dreams mattered. One day, after a particularly challenging coding session, Zoe looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Ms. Harper," she said, her voice trembling, "I just wanted to say thank you. My parents, they don't really get what I do. They think computers are just a hobby. But you make me feel like I can actually do this, like I matter." I felt my throat tighten as I pulled her into a hug. "You do matter, Zoe," I said fiercely. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise." As she left that day, I found myself reflecting on the strange turns life can take. Here I was, providing the very support and validation I had craved as a child. The cycle of pain and neglect that had defined my family for generations had ended with me. In its place, I was creating a legacy of empowerment and self-worth. It was around this time that I received an unexpected email from Lily. My finger hovered over the delete button, old instincts kicking in. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. "Dear Harper," it began, "I've started and deleted this email 100 times. I don't even know if you'll read it. But I need to say this, even if it's just for me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not seeing how much you were hurting all those years. I'm sorry for taking advantage of Mom and Dad's favoritism. I'm sorry for not being the sister you deserved." I read the words over and over, tears blurring my vision. It wasn't a magic fix, couldn't erase years of hurt with a few lines of text. But it was something, an acknowledgement, a starting point. "I've been in therapy," Lily continued, "trying to understand why I am the way I am, why I've always felt so empty. I realize now that all the attention, all the praise, it was a trap. I never learned how to be my own person, how to find value in myself beyond what others saw in me. You were always the strong one, Harper. I see that now." I sat back, letting out a long breath. The email went on, talking about Lily's struggles, since our father's death, her attempts to find a job, to build a life of her own. She didn't ask for money or help. She just wanted me to know that she was trying. For days, I mulled over how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect the peace I'd fought so hard to achieve. But another part, a part that sounded suspiciously like the compassionate, empathetic woman I'd worked so hard to become, urged me to reach out. In the end, I sent a simple reply. Thank you for your honesty, Lily. I'm proud of you for seeking help and working on yourself. I'm not ready for a relationship right now, but I appreciate your words more than you know. Take care of yourself. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a crack in the wall I'd built, a tiny opening for the possibility of future healing. As I hit send, I felt a shift inside me, like the final piece of a long unsolved puzzle clicking into place. I realized that true strength wasn't about cutting off all ties to my past. It was about being secure enough in myself to engage with that past on my own terms. That night, as Alex and I curled up on the couch, I told him about Lily's email and my response. How do you feel? He asked, his arm warm around my shoulders. I thought for a moment, searching for the right words. Peaceful, I said finally. Like I've finally let go of something I didn't even know I was holding on to. He kissed my forehead, a gesture so full of understanding and love that I felt my heart swell. I'm so proud of you, Harper, he murmured. You've come so far. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I found myself thinking about the long, winding path that had led me to this moment. The pain, the struggle, the hard-won victories. I thought about the little girl I'd once been, so desperate for love and approval. We made it, I whispered to her in the darkness. We're going to be okay. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. The future stretched out before me, not as a shadow of my past, but as a bright, open road of possibilities. I had faced my demons, confronted my pain, and emerged stronger for it. This was my story now. Not a tale of victimhood or resentment, but one of resilience, growth, and the power of self-love. As I closed my eyes, I felt a sense of excitement for what the next chapter might bring. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I had the strength to face them. After all, I was Harper. Daughter, sister, mentor, partner, imperfect, complex, worthy of love, and finally, beautifully, unapologetically me.